Welcome back to Fast Market, everyone, on the Schwab Network. Now it's time for our cash tag segment. For that, I'd like to bring in the co-founder of LikeFolio.com, Mr. Andy Swan, to the show. Andy, this is not a heavy lift for you and I to be talking about beer. Your segment is Constellation Brands, but you can touch on any of these because your data has all of them on there. What are you seeing in the beer segment right now?
Yeah, it's Constellation Brands. If you're going to talk about that, you almost have to talk about Bud Light
Yes.
and what's going on with that company. Since everybody knows Bud Light messed up in a big way, and how long that will last and the depth of that is what's up for debate. We're really seeing that ag controversy has led to what I would call, one of the longest lasting consumer backlashes we've ever seen in terms of LikeFolio data. Bud's happiness rating has plummeted from 76% down to a historically low 58%. And so when we think about that, that doesn't mean that people stopped drinking beer. It just means that they switched brands. And so where did they switch? Now, some of it stayed internal and went to Michelob Ultra, but we're really seeing Coors Light emerging as the major beneficiary of this Bud Light controversy. Web visits to Coors, Molson Coors products surged over 130% since then and are on the rise up and to the right. We really see Coors Light and Molson Coors, also the owner of Miller Lite, as the big winners out of this whole thing. In terms of Constellation Brands, ticker symbol STZ, we saw them benefit initially from the Bud Light controversy. We're starting to see that kind of plateau out in terms of both web visits and consumer mentions, consumer buzz, that sort of thing. They've got some great upper end Mexican beers that people really love. One of the top, if not the top, beer brands in the United States in Modelo, but we're seeing that just kind of flatten out. So we think the big long-term winner out of this is Coors Light. It's Molson Coors, ticker symbol TAP. We are seeing some early indications that maybe the worst is behind Anheuser-Busch InBev, but we're going to need to see more data before we kind of signal the all clear on this one, because this was a pretty deep cut for the consumer.
Yeah, and certainly reflected in earnings. I noticed that TAP they had a $2 billion buyback approved just recently. They've all been buying back stock, and we were talking a little bit earlier, Landon, about just the fact that that's sort of fallen off in the banking space. Do you think in Constellation, given the hit they've taken, that they're going to get more aggressive on that front? Have you seen anything from them, or is that more of a Molson Coors thing?
Yeah, it wouldn't surprise me at all, because we do see that there's every reason for the company to be very optimistic in terms of its very diversified portfolio hitting pretty much on all cylinders with consumers. And so, we think that the company should be optimistic. We think that the company should be bullish on its stock. We wouldn't be surprised to see them expand that kind of buyback program.
Yeah, Andy, I mean, when you look at Constellation Brands, you mentioned it. It's Modelo, it's Pacifico, my personal Constellation Brands beer of choice. It's also Corona, which used to be a little more popular, but Modelo has they seem to have benefit from the Bud Light fall off, because they've gone to now number one. And I can't, they've got one thing about Constellation Brands, they've got a very more diversified portfolio. I can't. Oh, yeah. My mother-in-law, she drinks the Rufino Chianti. That's her favorite brand. So Carol Perillo, shout out to you. So when you look at this more diversified group, that being said, as I mentioned, wine and spirits, their sales have dropped off. Beer has been keeping this company afloat, Andy.
Yeah, beer keeps them afloat, but that's really just cyclical. I think when you think about Constellation Brands, it's just whatever's popular at the moment. They have the product for that, and they have the relationships to get the shelf space for that. And I think that's a really big deal, to get the distribution that they need. And so they can weather any sort of shift in consumer taste really well, as long as they don't, screw up the brand really bad like Bud Light did. Then they're going to be fine. And I think, if you're looking for a very diversified kind of you know, I guess sin stock or whatever you want to call it, then Constellation Brands is probably top of the list.
Doesn't feel like sinning to me, but Andy Swan, we appreciate you coming on as always, talking about the beer segment. And by the way, their data covered all three of the stocks that we're trading today. Andy Swan, thanks for coming on as always.
Thank you.
All right, when we look at a name like this, by the way, I think we're reiterating this. All these stocks have been beat up lately,
yeah.
right? I mean, so